Before I get into this, I want to take a quick moment to describe the format of this video and any others like it I may do. I'm going to highlight 3 games on any given topic, one that is genuinely good and succeeds at what it sets out to do, one game that categorically fails, and one game that has a spark of a good idea or is otherwise a diamond in the rough, so to speak. Anyway, on with the show. Created by Metroid in 1986 and perfected by Castlevania Symphony of the Night in 1997, the Metroidvania genre's main feature is a large interconnected world map that promotes exploration. Story and progression are usually non-linear, and backtracking is almost always a requirement. Side-scrolling is to be assumed, but of course there are exceptions. Due to the nature of the sprawling environment being the most attractive feature of the Metroidvania, level design is really important. Not only how it's structured and flows, but also its atmosphere and theme. Metroidvanias are an exercise in world building and lore. Hyperlight Drifter takes the Metroidvania concept to the next level. With 4 areas to explore, 3 of which can be done in any order, Hyperlight embraces the non-linear gameplay progression. Currency and collectibles can be found, shortcuts and alternate routes opened, and previous areas revisited. The combat is fast and deadly. Because you have such a limited amount of hit points, battle is focused around dodging and avoiding attacks and scoring hits when you see an opening. Since the game is played from a top-down perspective and not side-scrolling, it's more focused on tough fights than it is platforming, which is something I prefer, to be honest. The gameplay itself is super fun and really fluid, but a Metroidvania is only as good as the world the game is built around. Hyperlight's world is one of the most intriguing and well put together environments I've had the pleasure of experiencing. It's post-apocalyptic, yet serene and beautiful. The state of destruction can be calm at times and frantic and scary at others. The narrative itself is really bare bones, so to compensate, the game tries really hard to tell its story through its environment, and it does a damn fine job. The story, the areas, the characters, the cutscenes, the enemies, and hell, even the music, all invoke this sense of mystery that is just outstanding. I found myself more invested in finding secret areas because of the bit of lore they would add rather than the bits of currency they hid. If you're an indie game dev that needs pointers on world building, play Hyperlight Drifter. It is seriously unrivaled in this department. Owlboy has a lot of heart. This game tries really hard to be something fresh and invoke that sense of adventure we all got when we were kids, but it falls short on both aspects. I really wanted to like Owlboy. It has some of the best pixel art and animation I've ever seen in a video game. Unfortunately though, lengthy dialogue scenes, boring one-dimensional characters, an unfocused musical score, and repetitive gameplay make for an overall underwhelming experience. While I am nitpicking here, none of these things make it a bad Metroidvania, so let me be more specific. Owlboy has no map. While this isn't inherently a bad thing for a game like this, it's missing some key ingredients that make it problematic. Generally, when there is no in-game map, the world has inbuilt landmarks or a centralized hub area that is immediately recognizable. This allows us, the player, to have a general idea of spatial relations between areas and zones. Owlboy lacks these things as well. As a result, each area feels detached from one another, and the environment feels more like a tree branch than it does an interconnected world. While Owlboy incentivizes players to backtrack for extra upgrade coins, I always found that locating each dungeon, and more specifically where those leftover coins were in that particular dungeon, was almost always more trouble than it was worth. Owlboy wanted to give me this impression of being wide open. I could go anywhere and do anything. The sky was mine for the taking. But in reality, the world was small, my path predetermined, and kind of lonely. In the end, Owlboy itself was a lot like its protagonist, Otis. It has a big heart and tries really hard, but it's just disappointing and you feel kind of guilty for thinking that. Momodora, Reverie Under the Moonlight, is almost a really good game. It has this great aesthetic that blends cute anime girls with a Bloodborne or Mordheim type setting. The pixel art is just filled with little details like character idle animations and backgrounds calmly moving in the wind. There's a great spread of areas that bring Karst City to life and make it feel like a lived-in place, which is great because you'll backtrack and re-explore areas for health upgrades and additional charms and items. I really recommend Momodora, if you're willing to look past the ugly parts, that is. The game is short. It's over just as it feels like it's getting going. The combat is really fun and fast, but doesn't get any deeper as the game goes on. It's focused on dodge rolling and attacking when you see an opening, but there's really only one melee weapon and just a single attack combo. You have a bow, but it doesn't ever play a bigger role than hitting switches and dealing chip damage. The game also has this reverse difficulty curve where it starts out a lot harder than it ends up. I died a whole lot more in the first area than I did in the last. Speaking of which, the price of death in this game is just a little bit more than it should be. Every time you die, it brings you to a game over screen in which you have to manually click retry. It's a pretty hard reset from your last checkpoint, leaving the part of the map you filled out undone along with any currency or items you may have found. Momodora, Reverie Under the Moonlight, is rough around the edges, but a fun core combat system and interesting art direction give it enough legs to stand on its own. Metroidvanias have been around for a while, and I don't see this genre going away anytime soon. With small projects, I feel as though a lot of developers can fall into the trap of valuing the narrative of the game over the world of the game. Although that can work in other genres like an FPS or a more traditional RPG, Metroidvanias need this overlap to be effective. At its core, a Metroidvania's gameplay is about discovery. Without an exciting world, the player loses interest in exploring, and in turn the combat, the story, the puzzles, and the secrets all become dull. A good Metroidvania should inspire that feeling that we all got when we were kids, of venturing just a little bit farther in the woods than we usually did.